You have trained the model, you're really excited about the model, you think you can solve a real world case, and you want to put it in production. You go ahead and stitch together a bunch of open source services, and you have your models in production. Really exciting. However, you need to ask yourself a question. Is having that model in production enough? Well, there are several factors that come into play as soon as you have your model in production. To start off with, you need to keep a track of any changes that happen around your model. You might have to track model drift. You might have to track any changes in your data. At the same time, you have to have an infrastructure around which enables iteration and improvement over the existing model. So how would such an infrastructure look like? I've gone ahead to sort of summarize a standard infrastructure which I think is widely used. I know it can look intimidating, but stay with me, I'll break it for you and make it easy to understand. So it usually all starts with data. We do some data analysis to have an understanding of what sort of models or architectures we should be using. And once we start training the model, you need to have a logic in place where you can keep a track of which models are the best models. And interestingly enough, in this example project, which we'll be presenting at the end of the session, we have also shown such a logic where we can keep track of the best models using the metadata and sort of also use that information in the production environment. And once at this stage you have an agreement on what models you want to put in production, you move into the serving phase or the model serving phase, where you go ahead and estimate the latency as well as compute your model will require, and you use the inference script to put it in production and expose it as an API endpoint. If you have been working on this model for really long, a really exciting occasion to see how your model works on the real world data. And this is just the starting of sort of monitoring phase where you have to keep a track of certain metric and keep validating your model on that metric and seeing how your model is working, even after it has been exposed an API endpoint. And at that stage, you, for example, trigger an event if your model goes above or below a certain threshold on that metric. And for example, initiate retraining, and after retraining, you can serve the model again. So, I mean, it is a very short intro of what sort of phases you can expect in an MLOps life cycle. What I want to highlight here is that really quickly things can become complicated. You have several components and they're interacting with each other in order to register metadata and so on. And more often than not, a lot of organizations rely on different products and components and services in order to stitch up an MLOps life cycle. And all these services love their own metadata. And what ends up happening is metadata is scattered all over the place. So let's have a look at some of the architectures these organizations use, which already have their models in production, in order to keep a track of metadata. So it usually starts with folder structures, branch names. They end up building in-house abstractions or scripts as well in order to keep track of that data. And it can lead to, say, maintaining open source services and also using the end-to-end platforms. On the right-hand side, I've highlighted some of the issues such approaches might have. It can require a lot of manual effort. Information is scattered all over the place. However, even if these might work initially when the number of models are not as much, and start sharing those results across your organization, these solutions wouldn't scale as well. And all these gradients of architecture with varying maturity sort of go ahead and highlight the need that it isn't enough to have your model in production. You need to have a certain level of control over your model life cycle. You need to have all that metadata from all the phases of the MLOps life cycle centralized, where you can analyze that metadata, but at the same time, use that data in order to, for example, invoke further releases. And also go ahead and share all that metadata if required. It also directly leads you to a full cycle reproducibility and features like model traceability and lineage as well, which are crucial if you have an array of app clusters and models in production.